Video is going to center on a short video interview of the Jersey Widows from PBS News, and it was dated September 10th, 2003, and it was entitled "The Jersey Girls 9/11 Widows Speak Out." And it's about 14 minutes, not very long, but I'm going to add some additional thoughts along the playing of the video. And here we go.
There's a tragedy.
Well, what I want to do also is I want to share the sound so you could hear it in high quality.
You think, how could this have happened?
I had faith in all of my leaders on September 10th that they were doing the best jobs that they could to protect the lives of my loved ones, my friends, my countrymen.
I didn't understand that I needed to look at the bigger picture. I've turned into a very disenchanted, fully awake, no longer naive person who's extremely driven. I want to meet with the NSA, CIA, and the FBI together in one room.
I want to tell them I need to communicate better. That's a nice.
Are you?
That's a nice
kidding?
idea.
Mindy Kleinberg, Patty Casaza, Lori Van Auken, Kristen Breitweiser. These women banded together after their husbands were killed, and now they're leading a campaign to find out exactly how did 9/11 happen, and exactly what's the government doing to prevent another attack.
We want to know the subject matter of the open hearings. We want to know who is testifying. We want the dates, and we want to know if we can submit questions.
A lot of people think, but we already know what happened on 9/11. It's been all over the news. And besides, Congress just released this investigative report about it a couple months ago. But this country has barely begun to learn the truth about 9/11. That's what the women say. And they want to make sure we eventually hear it.
There was another investigation. A lot of people tend to forget it's the Joint House Inquiry that started before the 9/11 Commission. And that was chaired by Porter Goss and Bob Graham. Porter Goss would go on to be the CIA director. Bob Graham would write a book about the findings of the Yemen hub and Al Qaeda, which is essential. The 9/11 Truth Movement dismissed all of this. This is well before 9/11 Truth Movement took shape. These were the real truthers, the Jersey Widows. But they didn't call themselves truthers. They were activists, concerned citizens. It was immediately after the commissions, after Jersey Widows became disenchanted by the lack of any interest in the questions that they had, because according to them, it was like 85% of the questions weren't entertained by either commission. That the 9/11 Truth Movement said that the entire commissions, the reports are all false, can't trust the government, and that World Trade Center 7 came down by controlled demolition because it looked like a demolition, right? This is the whole theme of the 9/11 Truth Movement, and it gave rise to the crackpot theories that centered around it after it, because what the 9/11 Truth Movement didn't do was basically alienate people that were going to share or propose fanatical theories, because they have one thing in common. They all agreed that the government lied about 9/11. But you ruined your reputation by being aligned with people that proposed these false theories, which ended up destroying the Truth Movement overall. Very few people are left in the Truth Movement. Richard Gage. That's it. Yeah, I mean, Jason Burmis, Christopher Bolin, Rebecca Roth, all they do is repeat themselves. And, they got, I guess, lives, right? They sold their books. They misinformed the people. And now if you call yourself a 9/11 truther, you're mocked, because societies look at you like a bunch of idiots because you propose really entertained and allowed for individuals to propagate fanatical theories. And some of the 9/11 widows who we're seeing today, some of them became really disassociated with the whole notion of being involved with 9/11. And meanwhile, these are the people that actually did something. Unlike the 9/11 truth movement, they forced the government to investigate and do something. 9/11 truth movement didn't do anything. They didn't even go to court. They didn't propose the White House to open nothing. All they did was sell books, comic books, talk all over the world about how buildings look like demolitions, how the hijackers are alive, how the planes aren't real, they're holograms. Wait, they are real, but they're drones. The hijackers are patsies. No, the hijackers are alive. No, the hijackers are dead, but they weren't involved with I mean, all these, Judy Wood space beams, melting towers, but not melting people. And all of this was meant to obfuscate any serious inquiry into 9/11. And the serious researchers were ignored.
We have no expertise, but what we have is a passion and a drive to right the wrongs and to fix the problems and to find the truth.
Mindy Kleinberg remembers the moment when she realized some people don't want the truth.
On September
Yeah.
12th, when I was still looking for my husband, thinking that he was going to somehow come home, 100 airline lobbyists went to Washington, okay, and lobbied for them to be protected against us.
Congress was about to pass a law that compensated victims' families, but it also severely restricted their rights to sue the airlines.
Isn't that something? I found that to be really unbelievable. The day after, not even 24 hours after 9/11, you had airlines lobbyists from United and American and Delta all going to the White House to propose that, they used White House legal counsel to help them from civil suits from victims' families because they were going to blame them for what? Lack of security. Was this ever investigated? No. Very few people did. One of them is DJ Thermodetonator. The others are like Kevin Fenton and of course the great Paul Thompson. I mean, you've had New York Times actually wrote about this, but it was brief, but at least they reported on it. And then later on, when there was attention paid to Argenbright Security, which is just a security company involved with providing security at the airlines, some of them, one of them being Logan, Frank Argenbright was fired by his own chair. They voted him out for questionable practices in hiring foreign individuals to work in the field, so they didn't have to pay him much. They did shoddy background checks on these people, and that's how some of the weapons got on board, like guns, which the federal government covered up for.
People like Mindy Kleinberg worried that they might never be able to force the airlines to go to court to disclose everything they knew about 9/11. Leaders in Congress said, "Don't worry, we're going to investigate 9/11." So the women were stunned when President Bush convinced Congress to back off. He reportedly told congressional leaders that a sweeping investigation might distract from the government's war on terrorism.
Right. This was okay. Let me help you along with this. This is true, actually. Senators Tom Daschle and Chuck Grassley, even John McCain, basically wanted to open up a panel of anywhere between 12 to 14 individuals with subpoena power to investigate the intelligence failures and the government's, what they knew and what they didn't know regarding pre-9/11. All right. And now we're talking about, well, all right, this is the essence of 9/11, because when you think about where the intelligence was focused on, which is Al-Qaeda's Yemen hub, right? The hijackers outside the United States in countries like Germany and Spain and Malaysia, right? When you start looking back, you'll see that the CIA had an interest on individuals that were coming out of the Yemen hub named Khalid al-Badr, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Nawaf al-Hazmi's brother Salim al-Hazmi. And their connection to an individual who the NSA and the CIA both found out, named Khalad, who was involved with what? The USS Cole bombing. So now we have a connection to a crime, and we can connect these people to a crime. That means the Department of Justice has to be notified. No, let's hold up. We don't want to tell the FBI everything. We want to monitor these people. And so they come to the United States. You see what I mean? Now we have we have a connection. Did 9/11 truth movement investigate this? No, because they don't believe in hijackers, and none of this matters. Right? If you don't have any hijackers, you don't have intelligence agencies, malfeasance, or if you want to, go a little bit more forward and be bold, maybe even foreknowledge, right? Because we don't know what they collected, what they didn't collect, or totally anyway. So you see what I mean? The intelligence failures are plentiful here.
As a result, the congressional investigation focused mainly on the FBI and CIA. They never examined what the airlines or the Immigration Service or the White
NSA.
House did or didn't do.
Why?
Then the women
Listen,
heard-
NSA were the first agency that we know of, domestic anyway, that were monitoring terrorists in Yemen, right? Because they got a phone number from Osama bin Laden's satellite phone. The NSA has this. And we're talking about the early 90s. I interviewed Michael Scheuer, the former chief of the bin Laden issue station. And he confirmed that the CIA were monitoring bin Laden in the early 90s. So was the NSA. And they got a number from the phone. They decrypted his phone. And that number was called a lot. And he was calling it a lot. And it belonged to a house in Yemen. Well, the NSA opened up a listing post. The CIA got involved. And that was 1996, ladies and gentlemen, 5 years prior to 9/11. Can you imagine the amount of metadata that was collected? And over the years, they got wind of a phone call about a meeting in Malaysia with high-profile terrorists. People like Yazid Sufat, who chaired the meeting, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Tawfiq bin Atash, Khalad, Fahad al-Quso, and of course, Khalid al-Badr, the Wapa Hazmi Salim al-Hazmi, involved in 9/11 attacks. Ridwan Samudin, Hambali, who's in Guantanamo right now, the Bali bomber, or the bin Laden of Southeast Asia, right? All these people were there. And then from there, they come to the United States with the full knowledge of the CIA and the NSA, but not the FBI. Maybe the FBI got wind on their own. I don't know. We'll talk about that in a bit. But you see the connections? Has anybody who's watching this video, do you know about that connection? If you haven't heard about it, because the Truth Movement didn't mention this, because they don't believe in hijackers, or it's not important enough to investigate.
that some frustrated legislators were trying to launch another, broader investigation. But the president and his allies in Congress were trying to block that. And that's when the women got together and said, let's organize a protest in Washington.
We went to Home Depot because we knew we needed signs, and we are in the line, the aisle of Home Depot, hand sawing slat, of wood, which was very comical because we had all the people in Home Depot looking at us like we were maniacs because we were slicing up, 50 slats of wood and really didn't know how to do it, and no one was helping us.
Eventually, they figured it out, and they held their rally in Washington. Hundreds of people showed up, including some U.S. senators. Kristen Breitweiser asked the whole country for support.
We need a full independent investigation. We must ask the tough questions and seek out the difficult answers. We must, as a country, grow and be made stronger and safer by the bitter lessons learned on September 11th.
No stone.
Mindy
remained
Kleinberg took to the
unturned.
podium, too.
We are asking you, America, to stand behind us. Please, pick up the phone, call your senators, call your congressmen, tell them that you want to be safe. Tell them that you want an independent investigation.
Not long after that, the White House called, and the president's aides said they wanted to talk. In fact, the New Jersey women and a handful of other survivors had a series of meetings at the White House. Some were reportedly rather heated, but in the end, President Bush changed his position, and Congress agreed to launch a new independent commission.
This is all pressure of the people. Didn't come from the senators I mentioned, right? but the people were involved, and he had a lot of interest. The media covered it. And now the pressure was on the White House. Well, Bush acquiesced, but it with limited funding. And it would be chaired by a staffer who has close relationship ties to the National Security Advisor under Bush, Condoleezza Rice, in Philip Zelikow. He would be the chief executive officer of what is known as the National Commission on the Terrorist Attacks of September 11, 2001, also known as the 9/11 Commission. So you have a Bush lackey controlling what can be seen by the commission staffers. You know, 9/11 Truth Movement basically says, oh, they're all in on it, you know, but they always used a quote by Thomas Kean that the commission was set up to fail. Lee Hamilton, right? They were the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission. But, you know, they're all liars. You know, don't read the commission because it's all lies. Well, how do you know if it's all lies if you've never read it? I'm convinced that most people, including Richard Gage, never read the 9/11 Commission. I'd be shocked if Richard Gage ever read a book without pictures in it. But nevertheless, these are the people that basically obfuscated and manipulated millions of people around the world over 20 years with insane batshit crackpot theories and told you the 9/11 is an inside job and that you got to keep repeating this and hand out flyers. And oh, by the way, I'm opening up a Patreon account, give money to my fund, and I'm going to go to Aruba every year with my wife. That's what Richard Gage has done for 20 years. He's never been in a court of law. He never will be, because that's not what he wants. In fact, he's making a film about a courtroom that doesn't exist, about evidence that he thinks exists, and this is what he calls activism. He's a fraud. Christopher Bolin thinks 9/11 is all Israeli operated and planned. In fact, the planes themselves were remotely controlled by Dov Zakheim, who invented the software, who was involved with all these Israeli officials and all the Arabs. They don't exist. In fact, Bolin also proposed once that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Guantanamo is actually a fraud. It's not him, but somebody taking it on the chin as him. And these people like Gage and Bolin and Rebecca Roth, who's not even an airline stewardess, never worked for the airline industry. And yet a group called Boston for 9/11 Truth actually interviewed her, had a meeting with her, and allowed her to have a voice still after all these years, knowing that she's a fraud. She has multiple names like, Monica Gaynor, Teresa something. She has multiple names. She wears a wig, right? But she never worked for the airline industry. She never says what airline she worked for, because you'll have to do your due diligence to find out that, oh, by the way, this name she gave me is not involved with any airline industry, right? Loose Change, look what they did. They proposed, their film is the most popular film ever around the world on 9/11, right? Well, it proposed that no plane hit the Pentagon. No plane crashed in Shanksville. But by that default, that means the hijackers are alive. Yeah, they proposed that too. All of this came to misinform the public. And who got forgotten about it? The Jersey Widows. Paul Thompson, Kyle Hentz, John Judge, Kevin Fenton. Over time, these guys who are the real researchers, the godfathers of true 9/11 research, the best in the world, are all gone now because they got totally overwhelmed by amount of propaganda. Now, there's no thanks to Alex Jones, who used his enormous platform to give rise to the no plane hitting the Pentagon by interviewing April Gallup, who wasn't even outside the Pentagon. She was inside and lied about it later on. Barbara Honegger got involved in her case. Barbara Honegger, who's from October Surprise, which was a conspiracy on its own under the Reagan administration, and then disappeared until years out of nowhere. 14 years later, she comes out of nowhere and gets involved with 9/11 Commission, proposes ridiculous theories. Now you don't hear of her anymore. The damage is done. Bolin, Roth, Honegger, all these people, okay, all gone. Jason Burmis, is affiliated with InfoWars, the godfather of disinformation, of alt media, meant to obfuscate, meant to manipulate, meant to victimize the mindset of American people about what is actually going on and to cover the actual conspiracies. where we can obtain information and hold people accountable.
To investigate 9/11, the commission is supposed to probe every corner of government and then recommend how it needs to change.
And I am honored to be here with the families.
Tim Romer is a member of this commission. He's a former Democratic congressman. Romer says the commission wouldn't exist if it weren't for the 4 New Jersey widows.
One of the most influential things that they did for me was not only dig into facts and give me knowledge, but really inspire me, both with their effort to move forward and say, we're not giving up. We will never give up. We are going to make government be accountable, and we are going to get answers.
Romer was also part of the earlier congressional investigation.
The only commissioner
One of the
to
women,
be on
Kristen
both.
Breitweiser, was in my office, and she said to me, Tim, we need you to be our prosecutor. We need you to not just ask the tough questions, but to knock down the doors. And she said, I have a wedding ring. And she took it off her finger, and she handed it to me. She said, you hold this. Where do you think I got this? And I said, maybe Ron gave that to you. I fumbled, and I didn't know. And she said, a couple months after 9/11, they found that ring that's in your hand. That's all I have left of my husband. And they found that ring on a finger. And I have a 3-year-old. And I want to be able to tell her someday what happened to her father and what happened to the country. That's what we're trying to do on this 9/11 commission.
But the New Jersey women figured they couldn't just trust that the commission would dig up the truth, so they started digging on their own.
This was the beginning of our research. We printed articles, copied them.
They gathered mountains of information from the internet and old
Oh,
newspapers.
wow, look at that. Actual due diligence, the scientific method that I always talk about, research, unlike the people who are involved with the truth movement currently, like Richard Gage, right? Kevin Ryan or Ted Walter, none of these people. Ted Walter's the head of the International Center for 9/11 Justice, and it's, garbage people that propose fanatical theories. They don't do what they're doing here, right? Look at the Jersey widows. Well informed, they took news articles and they put them in a timeline. Guess what? That gave rise to the Paul Thompson Terror Timeline book, the greatest book on 9/11 in the world. Because he got that idea from the Jersey widows, the real truthers. That's what these people are.
They took their binders to Washington. They met with members of Congress and spent days in hearings. They compared what different officials said and began to find discrepancies and contradictions. For instance, government officials say they can't establish an exact timeline for the events on 9/11. They can't even confirm exactly what time each plane was hijacked or exactly what time they learned that the planes were hijacked.
I sat in that hearing, and a lieutenant colonel at NORAD is saying that, the times in the logbook that we have written down might not be the exact time that the event happened. It could have just been when the person went and logged it in. And I'm thinking, this is the military. Aren't these the guys that say 0800 and, have everything to the second? And, is that not what we know about them? And now you have this catastrophic event, and you got to call in about a hijacking, and it didn't get logged at the exact time. I mean, it doesn't make common sense.
Right. And by the way, that lieutenant colonel she's talking about is Rick Scott. He actually gave the timeline before the 9/11 Commission. And even afterwards, Tim Romer was one of them. Richard Benveniste was another who basically came out later and criticized the NORAD about giving a faulty timeline as opposed to the timeline given by the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, I'm going to play a snippet of Richard Benveniste, talking about, giving an example of how NORAD's timeline didn't meet with the FAA's timeline. So here's that little bit. This is Jane Garvey, acting director.
From Senator Levin. General Eberhardt, there's been some confusion about the sequence of events on September 11. Perhaps you can clear this up for us. Timeline that we've been given is that at 8:55 on September 11, American Airlines Flight 77 began turning east, away from its intended course. And at 9:10, Flight 77 was detected by FAA radar over West Virginia, heading east. That was after the two planes had struck the World Trade Towers. Then 15 minutes later, at 9:25, the FAA notified NORAD that Flight 77 was headed toward Washington. Was that the first notification, the 9:25 notification that NORAD or DOD had that 77 was probably hijacked? And then General Eberhardt said, I show it as 9:24 that we were notified, and then he indicated that this was the first documented notification that he had. And then, interestingly enough, the questioning was, well, why was the delay? I'm paraphrasing, and General Eberhardt said, you'll have to ask the FAA. So we're asking.
Right. And I'd like to say, I appreciate that. I'd like to submit it for the record. I really, it is not as clear, perhaps, as, and my recollection is not quite the same. So I'd like to, but I'd like to double check it before I say it here.
Well, you will double check it and you'll get back to
We
us.
certainly
It
will.
would be useful if you could get back to staff this evening.
I was thinking that we could probably get the answer this evening, because
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. So it's both of the timeline, there's two discrepancies here, right? And the discrepancy is basically coming from the FAA, who is monitoring, the planes in the air through radar or satellite. So they know when the planes are taking off, when there's hijacking happening. And then that's told to NORAD, okay, Cheyenne Mountain, where base of operations is. Kevin Nespaney, the colonel there at Cheyenne Mountain. So then it relays to top brass, like Lieutenant General Ralph Eberhardt or Lieutenant General Larry something. I forgot his name. Damn it. Anyway. And they make the decisions about getting authorization from the president about a shoot-down order, because it goes to the military chain of command. That is the president, Secretary of Defense, and NORAD, the shoot-down command. But the president was in the air. The Secretary of Defense is outside the Pentagon when the Pentagon is hit. That's when NORAD and the FAA finally realized that planes are being hijacked. It didn't come at when the planes hit the World Trade Center. But they knew about the plane in the air near the Pentagon. I think approximately 30 minutes prior to it striking the Pentagon. There was no intercept query. And according to NORAD later on, they would have never intercepted any of the planes. But then another Lieutenant Colonel, Larry something, I forgot his name, damn it. I forgot that guy's name. Not Eberhardt. But the other one said if we had the correct timelines, we could have shot down all the planes. But nothing is set in stone. It's like there's always an argument. And the argument belongs to the FAA and NORAD. Their timelines differ from each other. And turns out NORAD's timeline was wrong. The whole timeline that Rick Scott proposed, that Kleinberg here was talking about. Yeah, the whole timeline. Off by either 2 minutes to 5 minutes. That's a lot.
The women found government documents that spell out exactly what officials are supposed to do the moment that a plane goes off course or cuts off its signals to ground control or does anything unexpected. And they read that NORAD sent up fighter jets dozens of times in the year before the attack to check out erratic aircraft. So the women wonder, what happened on 9/11?
On the morning of September 11th, we had 4 planes drastically off their flight paths, transponders disconnected, and the FAA procedure and protocol to notify NORAD and for NORAD to scramble fighter jets were not followed.
And it wasn't like they all happened in the course of an hour. What I think
Hmm.
is very frustrating is looking back when I speak to people, they say, well, it happened in such a short span of time. It did not happen. It happened over the course of 2 hours. You're telling me over the course of 2 hours, Andrews Air Force Base in the Washington, D.C. area, which houses F-16s, which fly cover for Air Force One, could not get a plane up in the air to cover the Pentagon?
The more the women searched for answers, the more they learned how the system works. For instance, the more you appear in the media, the more the world comes to you.
Because of our work being reported in the papers, we had people reaching out to us. We met with an air traffic controller from Newark who flat out said to us, look, I don't know what happened. All he could tell us was that the FBI showed up, took all of their files, all of their recordings, and walked out.
So the women decided to go to the top. They and other survivors met with the head of the FBI, Robert Mueller. The way Breitweiser tells the story, Mueller started showing them a PowerPoint presentation. She cut to the chase.
And we said, Director Mueller, you are our chief investigator. We have information that you have come in and taken these files, taken these recordings. We'd like to know what you learned from them. We'd like to know where you are in your investigation.
So you, all four of you and other family members are meeting with the director of the FBI?
Right.
And were you, you're sounding very tough and forceful right now. Were you really talking to the FBI director like this?
Yes.
Of course, the whole country's learned since 9/11 about those FBI agents in Phoenix and Minneapolis. They warned months before 9/11 that suspicious Middle Eastern men were taking flight training, including Zacarias Moussaoui. And the agents warned that maybe they were terrorists planning an attack. And Kristen Breitweiser says she wanted the FBI to clearly explain how could you have failed to put the pieces together.
I'm sitting there with a FBI agent who's very high up. Not the director, but nonetheless very high up in the FBI. And I said to him, I don't understand. You have the Phoenix memo, you have Zacarias Moussaoui in custody. You had actually been to the flight school that you picked up Zacarias Moussaoui at 4 or 5 times before to investigate other individuals, one of those individuals who happened to be a pilot for Osama bin Laden himself. And you had the Phoenix memo alerting you to the interest that these Middle Eastern men had in flight schools. How is it that you didn't find them prior to 9/11? So this agent says to me, do you know how many flight schools there are in America? Thousands. Do you know how many ground instructors there are? Thousands. And you expected us to go to every single flight school to find these handful of men? And I'm like, well, honestly, yes. So then I'm like, okay, fine, I'll give you that. I'll give you that you couldn't have hit every flight school. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, how is it that if there's thousands of flight schools and you could never have found them, how is it that you went to Embry-Riddle Flight School in Daytona Beach, Florida, hours after the attacks? If there's thousands of flight schools, how did you just happen to go to that one exact perfect school that some of the hijackers went to? How'd you know to go to that school? And he just looked at me and goes, we got lucky.
Yeah, and I'm going to play a clip from a documentary by Joe Trento regarding the disposition of the FBI, claiming that we got lucky, right? Well, no. According to this clip here, and they'll be playing the Logan supervisor of security, Ed Nelson, right? In the hours after the attacks, the FBI came to the office of Logan and were naming the hijackers when they were looking at security camera video. Here, watch.
Eyewitnesses were the only remaining source. 58 of the hard drives for the electric badges were confiscated by the FBI, along with the security camera video.
Did you ever sneak a look at that videotape to see if it was the same people?
No, it never happened with me. I don't know why.
Ed Nelson saw the tape just hours after the attack.
Because right when they showed me the tape, they rolled it, stop. Now there's one. Roll it, stop. There's the second one. I mean, they knew right away, and there was many of people coming through that checkpoint at the same time.
But Ed, how would they know? The FBI claimed they had no idea who these hijackers were.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it boggles my mind.
Right. So, okay, there you have it. Right. So it's not like this is a conspiracy, just made up out of nowhere. No, this is true. They knew they most likely knew who these people were, because, and then it goes to show you how'd they know that. Because remember, you had FBI agents that didn't know the hijackers were inside the United States. That's true. But how'd they know, how these agents know that? I don't know what to tell you.
Breitweiser suspects that the FBI was actually following the terrorists
Yeah.
before 9/11.
Maybe.
FBI officials deny that. But the congressional investigation discovered that some U.S. intelligence officials did have crucial information about Al Qaeda and its plots years before 9/11. They even knew that terrorists might be plotting to use airplanes as weapons. For instance, in 1995, intelligence officials learned that Al Qaeda planned to crash a plane into CIA headquarters.
Mm.
In 1998, they got
Bajinka
warning
plot.
that terrorists planned to crash a plane into the World Trade Center. In the spring of 2000, the CIA knew that an Al Qaeda operative had moved from Malaysia to California, and that another had a visa to come to the United States.
And that information came from the NSA, who were monitoring the Yemen hub. These two guys, Khalid al-Mihdhar and al-Fahmi, who went to the meeting in Malaysia.
They hijacked the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. And just a month before the 9/11 attacks, President Bush himself learned at a briefing that Al Qaeda might have plans to hijack.
And that's the August 16th presidential daily brief, where a lot of the information came from Ahmed Bassam and the Millennium Plot.
If you watch the televised press reports, and this is something that also anchored us early on, is you have Condoleezza Rice saying we could never have anticipated planes being used as
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would have predicted that these people would take an airplane and slam it into the World Trade Center, take another one and slam it into the Pentagon.
If you reach a certain level in the government or in private industry or anywhere, incompetence should not fly. If you are incompetent in any facet of your job, you should no longer be there. And I don't understand why that feeling is not passed on in Washington. I don't understand how George Tenet could still have his job. I don't understand how Robert Mueller could still have his job.
Hey.
I don't understand how Condoleezza Rice could still have her job.
Why?
Why? Because they completely and utterly failed.
The New Jersey women say they're getting skeptical that the 9/11 Commission could do its job. The commission is supposed to dig up all the facts, but
Yeah.
the commission's chairman has complained publicly that Bush administration officials aren't cooperating. They're not turning over key documents.
That's what I told you earlier in the video where Lee Hamilton, Thomas King complained that the commission was set up to fail. And the 9/11 Truth Group took that to heart and says, oh, they're coming out and saying it. Well, no, you morons. They're talking about how inadequate they are in sharing information. 9/11 Commission report isn't an all lie. It's an incomplete report because not in it was the Israeli operation under the Gerald Shea Memorandum, which was outlined under the Gerald Shea Memorandum regarding the espionage operation involving monitoring the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Southwest Laboratories, and living in close proximity to all of the hijackers with the use of moving companies that may have been separate, right, or involved. But I think they were separate. But involved in the shared operation. Compartmentalization works here. Not everybody's going to know everybody to keep the operation safe and intact. Then, they ignored the Saudi role regarding providing logistical and financial support to Khalid al-Mihdhar and al-Fahmi. That was covered up in the commission. Also wasn't reported was the Able Danger program by the Defense Intelligence Agency and SOCOM Army, headed by people like Anthony Schaefer and Eric Kleinsmith and Dr. Eileen Presser and others that were involved in the metadata collection of terrorist organizations inside the United States. And they found 3 of them. One of them belonging to Mohammed Atta in the Hamburg cell. Right? Enormous amounts of information was not involved with the 9/11 Commission report. Now, years later, is so much more. Donald Cannistraro report, the Operation Encore, which was the follow-up to the FBI's Pent Bomb investigation. There's a lot.
the White House won't let the commission interview government employees unless there's a minder in the room. Meanwhile, the women keep asking more questions that they want the commission to resolve. Can you think of any moment when the women said to you, "I just researched something and look at this, Congressman Romer," and you said to yourself, "Wow, I didn't know that"?
That happens on pretty much a weekly basis. They are always telling me, we need you to kick down the doors, to be responsible, to be our prosecutor and get at the facts.
These women are a little bit direct.
They are
They have to be.
aggressive. They are knowledgeable. They are well informed, and you need to be to get the kind of answers that we must have to make this country a safer place.
The women's crusade began in the aisles of Home Depot. Then it moved to the White House. They began by examining the past, but now they're also looking to the future. When will the Bush administration give courts the money they need for inspections?
Yeah.
When will the White House and Congress reorganize the intelligence agencies? What about America's relationships with the rest of the world?
Before 9/11, my husband and I had the Wall Street Journal, Barron's, and the New York Times delivered to the house. And I would open the New York Times and I would skip I'd read the front page and I'd skip the next 3 pages. And those 3 pages were about the Middle East and, or, the Soviet bloc, or, I never read them. And I never read them because I never thought it mattered. And ironically enough, my husband was killed by Middle Eastern terrorists. And I think to myself, my God, I should have read those stupid pages. I should have known who Osama bin Laden was. I should have known the name Al Qaeda. And I think that really, for me, that's a wake-up call.
I thought democracy just worked. And I learned that it doesn't go like that. That if you want to live in this great country of ours with our fabulous democracy and our constitution and, our different rights, freedom of speech and all the things that we take for granted, you have to fight for those things.
And that's the problem, is that, when you have an incident like 9/11 and you know that foreign and domestic intelligence are involved with an operation and it's not known to the public, you begin by covering up your interests. But then what does that say about the people who we chosen to lead? And what does that say about us ultimately? All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.